This time I would like to talk about Gerrit change workflows. The typical one, the custom workflows, and some other workflows that may be also interesting. Okay, so draft change workflow. If some of you not on 2.15, you probably still use it, or have used it. Then so-called work in progress workflow that was first implemented in core, but it wasn't accepted. Then we have a plugin, WIP Plugin, 2013, and there's some other way how you can implement work in progress workflow in Gerrit core without work in progress workflow. Then we had Gerrit adoption by Chromium project, where something similar as WIP workflow was also needed. And in the end, it landed in Gerrit core, starting from 2.15. And I also cover the migration path from old Gerrit versions. And the most common workflow to use Gerrit is to upload a change for review and used as a pre-submit workflow. So we don't put the change on the target branch, we put it for review, and we have a state, like a small state machine in Gerrit with new merge and abandoned per default, and if you push a change for review, then the change is in state new, and if you push submit button, you merged it, and you can abandon and restore the change, and they flip the state. So this is a pre-submit workflow. I guess the majority use this workflow. What you can also do, you can skip the review branch, and you can push direct to target branch and skip review. But maybe not all are aware of another, I wouldn't call it standard workflow, but supported by Gerrit. Thanks, Dave, for implementing this. It's supported since 2.14. What you can do is you push direct to your target branch, but then something exploded and you need to react on this. And what you can do is, after the fact that it was merged, you don't have any change to comment on the change, and you can push new change with merged magic branch option, and then you can comment on this. So when it is interesting if you use mixed mode. You use Gerrit you push to review and you push simultaneously direct to target branch. For example, LibreOffice project that heavily use Gerrit use exactly this mode. They have 50 maintainers. In this 50 maintainer don't use Gerrit. Don't use Gerrit for review. They push direct to master, and the contributor who don't have +2 right, they're not allowed to push directly to master, and they push for review. Okay, so what happens, even for maintainer, because LibreOffice is a complex project and support bunch of operating system, and maintainer usually use only Linux in 95%. They mark or break Windows or just do something wrong. What happens today, they have commit notification, a mailing list, and then start to comment in the mail and say, okay, this line probably broke on the mailing list, and this is not nice. So this workflow is can be used in this case, not on LibreOffice project yet, because they still use 2.13, and this is to come later on. Okay. So what we also had, what we heard is the need for some custom change workflow based on change states. Some guys from Qt project told us that what they did is interesting thing. They forked Gerrit, what you probably shouldn't do, and say, okay, just a new merge in abandoned state is not enough for us. What we want to achieve is to track down on which deployment stage all changes are found. So after merge, they want support integration stage, and then acceptance and pre-prod, and in the end, they want support production. Of course, it isn't possible with upstream Gerrit. So what option could you have in this situation? So first of all, you shouldn't fork. And maybe one option is to use issue tracker system that you can freely implement your workflow and link Gerrit issue tracker change to your Gerrit change. Another option is to write a plugin and use persistent backend to link the change with some stage or something like that. So, for example, verify status plugin and event plugins, a number of them use some kind of backend where this state can be stored. Okay. To understand the thing about work in progress, we should talk about draft change workflow. Many still on the older Gerrit version, where the draft workflow was invented, I think, 2011 or something. And the idea was very simple. The change is not ready. And we want to communicate that it is not ready. But in the same we want to say that it's not everyone should see this change. Wait, here. Not yet ready changes and only visible for reviewers. Okay? So if I upload a change as a draft, I can assign anyone as a reviewer, and only this person can see the change, and other cannot see the change. Okay? If I click on Publish button, then it is the change go in a new state, and I cannot undone this step. So it is already published and visible for everyone. All what I can do is abandon or submit. So the problem here, so what we did, we introduced yet another state. In addition to 3 already existing, we introduced draft change. What is the problem? The problem is what happens when I abandon my draft change. If I abandon the draft change, the interesting thing happens. He goes in abandoned state. Then if you restore the change, just click restore button, it will flip the state to new again. So what you actually did is you publish this draft change without actually the intent to publish it. All you did, abandon, restore, and it's unfortunately published. So to overcome this problem, one crazy idea was even made it more complicated and add abandoned draft state actually to handle this use case that you abandon your draft change and you restore, and then I know, okay, I'm currently in abandoned draft change and restore button is pushed, so the next transition is in the draft state. Okay, but it's make the life even more complex. So the decision was not to do that, not to add yet another artificial state to just handle this case. So the idea was not to allow to abandon the draft changes. Okay. So I don't know if many use this draft change workflow, but the one thing that you also can do is to use a draft patch set. In addition of draft change, you can also upload your change, upload your patch set as a draft, by saying exactly the same ref drafts master magic branch option. And in this case, what happens is that the change remain in the new state because it's already published change. But special attribute on the patch set level is attached to this patch set to say that the patch set is draft patch set. What happens if you are not a reviewer of this change, and if you look on the change that have unpublished patch set, you would see 3 existing patch set because they are regular, and you wouldn't see the next patch set number 4, and only reviewer would see this. Also, this is visibility constraint, and if a reviewer said, okay, it's look good, then you can publish the patch set, and in this case, everyone can see this. Okay, so what's the problem with this workflow? There are many of them. First of all, it is complex. You need to understand you are of change level. Is your entire changes draft, or it's only patch set is draft and change is a regular change? That's one thing that many have problem to grasp. And another problem is that the visibility constraints and the not readiness of a change, the 2 orthogonal concepts that mix together in one workflow. So usually in open source project, you don't have any visibility constraint. If I talk about OpenStack or Wikimedia or LibreOffice, I've never ever seen any need to hide anything. Maybe in enterprise environment it's different, but usually you're completely open. For example, OpenStack share everything, every assets except root password is open, so you don't need to hide anything. So we don't have at all this visibility constraint. So what is needed, however, or what was needed for OpenStack and LibreOffice and Wikimedia, big user of Gerrit, is not readiness concept from the draft change, but not this thing with visibility constraint. And another huge disadvantage is that you are not able to flip the draft status again, like if it was uploaded as a regular change, or if it was uploaded as a draft change, but then it was published and now it's a new state. You cannot say it should be a draft. I think, David, correct me, we have a plugin even for that, force draft, right? Exactly for this use case, we have a force draft plugin that can flip the bit again. So this is a problem, because I think maybe my change is okay, and I uploaded it for review, and then reviewer find as a regular change, and then reviewer find, okay, this is a serious problem with this change, and I need to address them and take a couple of weeks or months, and I can say, okay, it's not ready. And the problem with this is that the dashboard is full with many changes, and I still see in my dashboard not ready changes. So the idea is to hide not ready changes, clearly communicate that is something that need to be addressed. Okay, so and exactly with this idea in mind, OpenStack project contributed in 2012. David Ostrovsky from infrastructure team from OpenStack project added new state to Gerrit and called it work in progress. So what is the different, as you can immediately see, is that you can flip the bit between ready and VIP how many often you want. Right? You can push it as a VIP, or you can push it as a new, and then later you can flip a bit, and the consequence is to clearly communicate to reviewer, okay, I see I need to do something, right? And the next consequence is that if in this state, then the dashboard are cleared from the changes that in this state, okay? So what is the problem with this approach? Problem with this approach is that it was done at the same time as the draft workflow was invented and added to Gerrit core. So as a result, we have even more complicated situation because we need a work in progress from OpenStack project and we need a draft from Gerrit core. And I understand Sean's decision to say that's crazy. That wouldn't make happy anyone. And that's the reason that the contribution from OpenStack project and another and second problem, it was around 800 something big change, and it was a challenge to review. Okay, so the decision was to say, well, draft workflow doesn't really fit to your use cases, your scenarios, and we get draft. Okay, so what is the solution? Okay, after long of thinking, one approach would be, okay, we get only this draft state. This draft state was already in Gerrit core, so why wouldn't we use this draft state to somehow mimic the work in progress workflow that was needed for major open source project user? And for that, the intention was to, first of all, to disable the draft workflow, to allow to disable draft workflow in Gerrit core. It wasn't possible, so it wasn't just implemented like a standard workflow that everyone can use, and the decision was, okay, let's add this option to say, okay, this change allow draft equal false in Gerrit config via disable a draft change workflow. As a consequence, you cannot push to this magic branch. You don't see publish, delete. It's not there anymore. But on the other side, you still have this draft state. It's so to say free now, and can be used to implement work in progress workflow, real work in progress workflow. So we can flip the bit how many time we want between draft and new, and it was also possible to hide the changes in draft state from the dashboard. So what is the problem with this approach? The problem with this approach is because we disabled the draft workflow, we cannot push the change as a draft. So as a draft, that in this case would mean a work in progress workflow. So this is not as good enough. So, but it's better than nothing. And another problem with this approach, somehow we wasn't convinced that it's all of the stuff belong to Gerrit core. And that's why WIP plugin was written, and it's worked pretty well. You install this plugin. This enable you to flip the bit between ready and work in progress. So in this example, I'm showing you the dashboard from another user, and I see my change. Right? So, and if I go to this change, and you see this work in progress button that contributed by the WIP plugin. You can flip the state to say, okay, I need to address something, and it will take time. Don't look at this change until I think it is ready. In this case, what happens, the plugin implementation of this UI action would write a new message to this change and flips the bit to work in progress. And if you look again, if the reviewer look again on this dashboard, he see that the change is disappeared. How it works? It needs some adjustment in Gerrit core that we said, okay, if allow draft is not allowed, then we filter out the changes in state draft from reviewer dashboard. It's a little bit hard-coded, but it was the decision to go that route. Okay, that is the opposite action for work in progress changes. I can reactivate it and say, okay, now it is ready for review, and then the reviewer would get on his dashboard, would see it again. Many users actually use this plugin. I don't think the OpenStack workflow use it. So what is the problem of this plugin? So the problem of this plugin, because it is a plugin feature, not a Gerrit core feature, many use cases and many aspects wasn't implemented. For example, one of the important one is notification. So it's not, the whole notification we don't have, I think even not on master, some extension point for notification code that we can influence from a plugin to say, okay, don't send or send something, so it wasn't completely not implemented. Because allow draft disabled also magic branch, I cannot push a change directly as a WIP, and the stream events for CI or for user that would like to observe some event that the change was flipped. For example, one decision from CI could implementation pipeline would be to say, okay, I ignore WIP change. If I see that the change is in WIP state, I don't build it because it's cost too much or something like that. It was also not implemented. Okay, so we had somehow not really good solution for everyone, for all work in progress workflow fans. And that's why we started to think, okay, what is the alternative? Okay, I don't want to use draft workflow, fine, I can disable it. A WIP plugin is better than nothing, but let's say, what is the other option? So actually, this is showed how flexible Gerrit code review system is, that you can implement it something similar using completely different concepts. So let's check what we can do. Okay, that what OpenStack project used in the end. Okay, the story with OpenStack project is they implemented this WIP change that I mentioned, and they forked Gerrit, and they used a couple of years, and then they realized then they're in the way of no return with that approach because they cannot upgrade. And then the lesson learned was, Luca mentioned it already, don't fork Gerrit. So, and they wanted to upgrade to new version. I think it was 2.11, and it was almost impossible because they were used to changes on top of upstream Gerrit, and they were more or less not portable. So the idea was to use something standard or nothing else, and the standard was they use a label. I think it labeled call approval or workflow label or something, and they configure the labels that only change owner can vote -1 on this label, and then they used custom dashboard to say that I don't want to see any changes where this label is has value -1. And, so to say, VIP workflow für Puma, that doesn't really support it. Okay, another option would be that if change owner vote a -2 himself on a change, I would like to filter it out on the dashboard. Okay, and another option is the recent feature is assignee. Everybody aware of this new feature? You can assign a change to any specific person. I think it was in 2015, David? 2015 or 2014? Assignee feature? 2014, okay. Since 2014, something disappeared. Okay, at least one. Yes, with assignee workflow, what you can actually do, you can say, okay, as a reviewer, I think change owner have to address something, and I just assign it to him. And then you can play ping pong between change owner and reviewer and assign it back and say, okay, now it's your turn. Okay, I don't want even talk about change edit. You can try to do something like this, but you don't see notification and nobody can review your change. So all these alternative approaches have issues that are not addressed. So, and in the end, we didn't have any a good answer on all this need, but luckily we get new Gerrit customer. I don't know if everyone is aware of this. One of the major Gerrit user today is Chromium project, and to cover their workflow, they discovered exactly the same needs like OpenStack project, because OpenStack project is the biggest that I'm aware of, with thousands of users, thousands of projects, and with a huge dashboard queue and with huge notification per day, thousands of mails only from Gerrit, and they cannot handle this, right? And if you see another customer appears on the horizon, you see exactly the same issue in issue tracker, and there wasn't a good answer in Gerrit back then, and the solution was, okay, so let's revisit the VIP workflow and try to address not solve problem and also help adoption of Gerrit for Chromium project. Okay, so again, revisited what we are actually talking about. So software development is all about communication, and Gerrit should streamline the communication process and make the next action to take from reviewer or from change owner obvious. So what is this next action? Should reviewer do something? Should change owner do something? And if you push work in progress button or ready for review button, we call it start review button, then it's clear. And we record this action in change message, and we create notification, and we address dashboard issue that the changes are hidden from reviewers dashboard if it is in state work in progress. So I encourage you to have a look to this proposal, work in progress. This is a link. I don't, Luca, we would put all the slides in some place, okay? We'll just, we haven't found good location for proposal. It is a change that just abandoned, we should probably solve it and put on our web page in some location. But it's interesting to understand the whole concept behind this. You can better understand the implementation. Okay, so, and about implementation, we wanted to avoid the mistakes of draft workflow and say, okay, we don't even consider to add another state to Gerrit. We want only standard states, new, abandoned, and merged. And for this reason, we added just the change attributes and not a change state. That solves this problem with losing the right state, like with abandon and something like that. And it was really easy to implement because we did it in 2015, and we only solved this in NodeDB. So in NodeDB, you can easily add any attributes. Okay, so this is already implemented with an example on Gerrit Review. So this is a regular chain, and I go to buttons and just push mark as view in progress button, and as a result, you see we have a work in progress change, and as a consequence of this, the reviewer, all those reviewers don't see this change on the dashboard. As a consequence, if in this case it's my change, if I upload new patch set on this change, there is no notification at all. This change doesn't exist. Only I can do something with that, right? Okay, so it's an opposite action. Okay. I think I forgot the opposite action, but it is just to call the start review button. And if I do this, then all reviewers notified with a small message, this change is ready for review, or you can take a look, okay? So one problem with this is that the start review button is that sometimes change owner need a way or reviewer to comment on a change that is in work in progress state. For this case, you still need to push start review button, and then it's somehow hidden. Also, I had a problem to find this button, and this is this save button, and you comment, you push the save button, and the comment are saved, and this change, there are no notification, this change still remain in work in progress state, but you recorded your comments. Okay, so we were talking about during the hackathon this week, and actually this workflow really could use a major UX refresh. I think that PolyGerrit team is aware of this problem, and UX team maybe this or next year would come up with some proposal how to resolve this. But it's possible. If you push this button, then your commit are saved, the comments. Okay, so the next question is, who can flip the work in progress a bit? Change owner, clearly I'm a change owner, and I got a review, or from the beginning I upload a change in VIP state. The change owner is the first candidate to do it. We did it this way, that we said, okay, only change owner can do that, nobody else, and then people change the state to work in progress, and then they leave company, and nobody can proceed with this change. So the next candidates were, of course, Gerrit administrator to be able to enable them to flip the change from VIP to ready and the opposite direction. But then other installations said, okay, we are huge Gerrit installation, and only 2 people from 1,000 Gerrit user are administrator, so it doesn't really work to only provide them the ability to flip the bit, in addition to change owner. So the next consequent step was to add this ability to project owner. So all these 3 groups can flip the bit back and forth between ready and work in progress. Okay, the next core feature is, of course, that we allow to upload change directly with VIP state. And there's 2 possibilities how you can use it. And if you already have a work in progress change, you just upload. This is the difference with OpenStack approach. They always flipped it to ready if you just upload a new change. We decided not to do too magic implicitly. So if you just push without any option, then the change still remain work in progress. You need to explicitly provide this option to flip the bit, or you go to change screen and say start review. The next aspect that addressed in the core implementation of work in progress workflow are notification impact. If changes in VIP, there's no notification at all. They have another consequences if you push abandon button. We decided to notify the reviewer, and if any commands provided, then say from a reviewer on a work in progress chain, then the change owner is notified. Okay, last but not least, the dashboard, very heavily used by Gerrit user, and we adjusted the underlying query for incoming reviews and said, okay, if this all changes in state VIP should disappear from reviewer dashboard, right? And in addition, we added new section like work in progress changes. Okay, but how we implemented this? This the second aspect, incoming review filtering. We said, okay, if a change is in state VIP, not in state VIP, only then show on reviewer dashboard. But this introduces one problem. You never know how your software is used by your users. And Axis guys, Sven, I think, noticed that this is exactly what they want to figure out for a reviewer to find what is his changes in state VIP. So this is exactly what you cannot do in current implementation, because in Gerrit core already reviewer self already filled out the VIP changes. So one idea to address this would be to change this filtering, not to do it directly in reviewer predicate, but on dashboard itself. So let's see if we manage to implement it already in next Gerrit versions, or maybe even in 2.16 with minor patch. Okay, the next feature request was to say, if I upload changes, I would like always, I'm not sure why it makes sense, someone from Angle project from Google, I think, explained it, very long explanation on the issue tracker, but they just wanted one simple bit in user settings, set new changes to work in progress by default. That means if they upload a change, it's always work in progress. And then the next feature is to say, okay, not to do it per user setting, but to do it on project level. so that if, of course, you can inherit it and set it in some place in your project hierarchy that all inherited project also have the setting. In this case, if you upload without any option, all changes for this project are flipped automatically to work in progress. Okay. Maybe you also use inline changes. So create change directly in browser. What we did previously, they created changes from browser were draft changes, and we decided to say, okay, we don't want to hide anything. Automatically, change created in browser is a work in progress change. Clearly, why? Because how the inline changes implementation create an empty change. You have a change, you don't have any files in it, and if somebody already see this change, wonder, okay, what's going on, but you see it is a work in progress, and you populate, you add the files directly in browser and change something, and you publish your change edit, and then you have the chance to say, okay, it's ready for review. Okay, so what is the problem here with this approach? So the problem with this approach is, as already with OpenStack suggestion for work in progress, we have a conflict between two similar workflows. We have a draft workflow still in Gerrit core, and we decided to implement real work in progress workflow also in Gerrit core. And these approaches have many similarities, but they define one major aspect, visibility constraint. The work in progress workflow doesn't have any visibility constraint. At any point of time, the change is always visible for everyone, right? But they have similarity because you push on draft magic branch and you push this VIP option, and it would be incredibly confusing to preserve the draft workflow and introduce new workflow work in progress. So we said, okay, it is not a good idea. Okay, the idea was to kill draft workflow, replace draft workflow with VIP workflow. But what is the problem with this? Well, the problem with this, you can do it because the visibility constraint gone, and you don't have a replacement for that with just work in progress workflow, right? It's just the work in progress only say my chain is not ready. When the old draft workflow said it is not visible. It's something completely different. So we cannot replace. So what we do now? Private changes. So the solution was, okay, to split this, to dismantle the requirements and to say, okay, this is orthogonal concept. We have orthogonal workflow for this. And what's the name? The name is private changes. That maybe give you an explanation why you find in 2.15 both approaches. So the private changes say for visibility constraint only. If I upload a change and say either during the push or later, we say it is a private change. It doesn't mean that it's not ready. It's just, it's only the visibility constraint. And nobody can see it unless you add some reviewer explicitly for this change. And only reviewer can see it. Nobody else. I'm not sure what is useful. One explanation is for an Android project, they don't want to expose the changes unless they are reviewed. This is one way of it. Maybe another option is for security issue. From security issue, you don't want to expose a change that is not yet ready. And one interesting thing of private changes that you can even merge the change and you can still preserve the private bit so that nobody sees it even as the change is merged. I'm not sure why it does make sense? Because at least in open source project, you replicate the whole repository to some other places like GitLab or GitHub, and at least at this point, all your private changes merged are exposed to the whole world. So, but one important thing to see here, again, we didn't make the mistake of draft workflow. We haven't added any new additional states. It's still one attribute, and of course they can be overlapping. We can say, okay, the same change, you push work in progress button, then you flip the VIP state, and on the same change, I don't know if it makes sense, but just to explain that it works, you say it's also a private change, right? As an implication of this, you cannot merge this because you cannot merge changes that work in progress. So at least this bit you need to flip again to ready, and then you could even merge a private change. Okay, now you see that the answer to discontinue, how we can discontinue draft change workflow, we needed to replace with two different concepts that call private changes and VIP changes. Okay, now that we understand why we have two concepts, the only question is, okay, you have version 2.14 or older version, and you migrate to 2.15, how you do that, right? Because you have used maybe draft changes in your projects, and you have thousands of draft changes, or you remember you don't even have to have a draft change. You can have normal change, 5 minutes. You can have a normal change, but you have a draft patch set, right? So this also need to be considered for migration. And that we have figured out, okay, we have two concepts, and we migrate all concept, draft change, to one or another. We cannot mix and say, okay, 35% of changes we migrate to work in progress, and the rest we migrate to private. So you have to decide. During the migration, okay, we provide a same default that we figured out only later. That is the right one. We flipped it after we have already released, and someone complained about default to private changes. And if you don't do anything, you still see this question, migrate draft changes to private changes. Default is work in progress. You just put enter, and you are good to go. Okay, if in case you change your mind and say, okay, I do want to have a private migration, to have a private changes, one thing to consider is that it's problematic. That's why we flipped the default and preferred the work in progress changes and not private changes, because now you remember also draft patch set can be on normal changes, and that I just forgot to remove, and the consequence was that all such changes were migrated to private changes. Even merge changes. I think we had this problem even on Gerrit@googlesource.com, and the consequence was that many changes wasn't visible anymore for other people other than reviewers. And workaround to fix that is to find such changes with this query and then unset the private bit. Okay, we try to remove all traces from old draft change workflow, but in the end we had to leave one place, one magic branch, ref drafts master. If you remove this, Then we figured out that some external tools, like a Git review from OpenStack or repo tool from Android project, still use this magic branch. And that's why it wasn't possible to remove. And then we said, okay, let's try to find out some something that would make sense. And despite we tried hard to do it, it's, from my point of view, not really optimistic approach, because if you push a change in 2.15 or 2.16 to ref drafts master, it is per default private. And if you amend your change and push again, then it would create a change edit on top of this private change. And if you amend and push again, then it would replace the change edit. That's kind of not expected. So the idea is just to discontinue this whole approach and maybe in 3.0 kill this magic branch. Hanwen tried to do it, and
there is another one in I guess it's hosted in GitHub somewhere.
Okay, maybe you can figure out. That's all about workflow, different workflow in Gerrit, and maybe you have now a better understanding about the history. Thank you.